Hi, John,
Hello, Jerry.
and welcome to the Mindfully Gay podcast.
Hello, welcome everybody.
And it's the first week of October?
Yeah, can you believe it?
Yeah. So I don't know when you're listening to this, but we just finished our last retreat.
Yeah,
I think we had,
10.
I think we had, well, including us
Oh, yeah,
and
including us.
Bruce,
Right.
we had like 13, 14
Yeah,
people.
right.
Yeah. So, and we had people from Montana,
Mm-hmm.
Idaho,
Idaho.
Salt Lake City,
Right.
and very eclectic. We had a couple of trans guys there. We had lots of gay guys there, and
People who've experienced some of this before, like Lodge. But
right,
we had some like brand new folks who've never done anything like this before.
yeah, our little friend from Montana
Oh,
just
that's right.
randomly the day before
That's right.
said, "I'm doing this," and signed up and showed up, and
Yeah.
and yeah, so it's always interesting. Um, I'm always curious about who is showing up,
Mm-hmm.
what motivates them to show up.
Right.
Because I think in many ways, what we're introducing to them is a totally different paradigm, right? We're talking about how to unite and bring body, mind, and spirit together for self-exploration
Mm-hmm.
and to dare to build community in a platonic, loving brotherhood kind of a way.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that. So I thought, we could probably just do a little recap then of, certainly our experience and what we witnessed at the retreat, maybe with some of those highlights, because it is curious, what's motivating folks to show up to these particular retreats, especially if, from, signing up the night before
Yeah.
and driving down from a different state.
Yeah, that was like an 8-hour drive for him, wasn't it?
Yeah, just kind of crazy. Um, so what did we do? We did several things at this retreat. Um,
We ate.
we did eat. Very important.
Lots of food.
Very important. But so what are the components? I thought maybe our listeners would be
Yeah.
interested in what kind of goes into.
So the first night we get people together to have a dinner. Really meant to be very social and engaging. And then we get everyone into the first heart circle where we kind of introduce each other and ourselves to the group. And we have little games involved to kind of help break the ice. And then we start building our altars, right? And one is kind of one is a ancestor altar that is in relation to our own ancestral lineages. But then we give everyone the assignment to identify gay, queer, historical figures on whom paved a way for us to exist today in 2024 with the rights and the blessings that we have as being queer folk.
Right.
And that's always interesting because Leslie Jordan was on our altar this year.
And we always have Marsha P. Johnson.
Yeah, Marsha's always there. And then we camp out in the house. People, spread themselves out and find a place to nest down for the night. Then in the morning, we start out with yoga.
We have yoga practice.
And I always think of the yoga as almost prescriptive, meaning that it seems like your yoga instruction is always meant to open hearts, open energy, move people in a place of being receptive. Yeah. And then what did we do after?
We have breakfast.
Yeah, food.
Yeah, more food, more food. But then we really get into all the ceremonies and activities, and
well, we did that first heart circle.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of looked a little bit. Those circles are always different, but I think today that one turned out to be looking at the sources of our domestication. How did we reach these conclusions of who we are, and how would we like to envision ourselves forward?
Right.
Yeah. And then was it the mineral exercise?
Yeah.
So we brought out an elemental ritual, which was an invitation to have kind of a deep meditative moment of kind of activating our core wisdom and knowing. I want to give away everything. And then part of everything's a blur because the day before I went and had a physical.
Oh, that's right.
And I got double vaccinated. I got the flu vaccine as well as the COVID booster, of which I was promised I would not have any reaction, which was a lie. And so right. There were moments that are kind of blurry, okay. But I think we ate again.
We did something, we'll certainly go back and talk details with some of these things, but, we did the ancestor burning.
Oh, that's right.
Which is always one of my favorite ceremonial pieces that we do. And in that one, we have the opportunity to honor someone in our lineage, in our ancestral lineage who's passed on. And we create a plate of food. We build an altar out on the fire pit. And it's like a dining room table, right? And we have an opportunity individually to speak to that ancestor, to speak to that person, and offer them some food and offer it onto the altar there. And then at the end, after everyone's got an opportunity to do that, we set that on fire, and that's the offering. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and I noticed in some of our exit interviews, people seem really impacted. And it never occurred to me until I was hearing this in the interviews, right? That our culture buries people and forgets about them.
Yes.
Except on Memorial Day.
Yes.
And in a lot of indigenous cultures, a relationship with your ancestors is an ongoing source of connection and inspiration. And so like the Dagra people that, from Africa, they're in constant communication and connection with the ancestors and trying to figure out how do we satisfy the needs of the other side as well as our own. And it's reciprocal. As we acknowledge them, they help us.
Right.
And that's very true in a lot of these traditions. And that's what I was kind of hearing is people seemed kind of relieved at the idea that they had permission to connect to grandma and grandpa.
Right. And this is what really, I think, struck me for the entire retreat, I think, was that comment. One of the participants talked about just kind of the norm, air quotes, of, how we deal with death, especially when it's a family member. Yeah, there's the death, a funeral, maybe a wake that goes along with that, and then it's done. And then they're kind of forgotten until maybe the anniversary of their death or like Memorial Day or something. And you go to the grave and put your flowers. But other than that, you really don't talk about, certainly not talk with that ancestor. And I think for me, the retreat really settled around that experience because this was, I think, very, very new to people, especially queer men.
Yeah.
Like this is just something that we just don't do or even think about doing. And to be able to introduce this to this group was meaningful to me, and I'm hoping it was meaningful to them.
Yeah.
That, because each exercise, I think, was really set up in regards to, kind of these ancestral technologies, really, even with the mineral work, with the rocks, getting into our bones, and our DNA, that we have these connections to, past generations and beyond, and to experience that and to cognitively, let that sink in. Like, yes, we have this connection. We have this connection. And to reinforce that with the altar setting, presenting someone who's passed on in our lineage. And then I think a very important piece, which you mentioned, was, someone in our gay history, that they don't necessarily have to be in our lineage, but just someone, an icon of sorts, who have paved the way for us as queer men. And then of course the ancestor burning, and then we finish with the lodge, which is, I think, deep spiritual ancestral work. So I'm hoping that our participants really see the significance and the importance and the accessibility of ancestral work. Let's hear some reactions from some of our participants. This is Tim, Rolly, and Andy.
My name's Tim, and I am from Sugar House, well, Liberty Heights. You know, Scottish German background, if you want to know. And I just arrived here. I've had a really busy week at work, and right now I'm feeling relaxed and grateful to be in this wonderful space. I mean, a little nervous, a little bit, but it's because I haven't met all the participants, and so that's always a little scary to meet new people. But I'm actually really excited for this. I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
My name is Rolly Young. I live in Salt Lake City. Yes, we've used the word community, and that's kind of what it feels like for me right now, is that everybody that's here is at a different place in their journey, but open to assisting me, or being open to be assisted, or to share, to grow, learn from each other. So many, I mean, there's probably as many different personalities and spirits here that you can get in a room or in a single location, so that's awesome. Oftentimes my life has been homogenous and just surrounded by the people the same as me, and there's so much to be gained from diversity.
I'm Andy. I'm from Salt Lake City. I'm feeling a little anxious, not because like there's anything to be anxious about, but I think that it's been a very energetic week. Like for everybody across the board, it was just the eclipse. So it's eclipse season, and so big shifts happening in astrology. And I think with the retreat, I'm excited to have like a slow down, like a forced slow down. I'm kind of in a space of like wanting to do a little inner child healing too, and it's always been like a very safe queer space. And I know they've been very helpful in like how my family has interacted with me as a queer person.
Yeah, I think I'm gravitating to the mineral exercise that we did because, like you said, the component to that is about waking up. This comes through Melodoma Samay and the Dagra people,
Right.
but the idea is that mineral is the source of our indigenous root knowing.
Mm-hmm.
That all of us, independent of our genealogy, if you will, right? All of our ancestral roots take us back to Africa.
Yeah.
And that somewhere in our lineage, right? We think of ancestors as grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles that are passed on.
Mm-hmm.
But in many of these traditions, that ancestral lineage goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, back to the beginning of time.
Right.
And Maldoma often said, somewhere in your lineage were people who knew how to live in relationship to the land and the spirits, and they had that wisdom. And through this mineral ritual, we wake up that knowing. And the reason I contrast that is because I think what's important about that ritual
Mm-hmm.
is, I heard a quote the other day from this woman who said, thinking I'm extraordinary takes you off the hook. And I thought,
that was a great quote.
I thought, damn, right? How many times I've looked to coaches and looked to guides and teachers and elders.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I project this idea that they just kind of got there by coincidence, right? And and yet what I know about the story of most of my elders and teachers is there's definitely a path to get there. But we don't see the journey, we see the performance. And what I would not want people to get from the podcast or from the retreats is that I think the transparency issue of this podcast is to demonstrate that we're all doing our work.
Yeah.
And so that ritual was really about waking those men up
Mm-hmm.
to their own power,
Yes.
their own knowing,
Mm-hmm.
their own intuition, and honing into that, honoring it, magnifying it, and then inviting their ancestors
Yes.
through the rituals that we talked about to speak to them, to guide them, to plant moments of inspiration so that each man could leave that retreat and continue the work that they started, that they don't need yoga master and shaman master to do it for them, that they have the capacity. And I was telling someone the other day, they were very inquisitive about all the shamanic stuff. And,
Mm-hmm.
they hear the songs and they see the shaking of the rattle. And I said, what's interesting? It's very few of my elders has spent time detailing the instructions of how to do the ritual.
Mm.
But the invitation has been to do the inner work, to clear the vessel, to be able to receive, to be able to hear my own voice, to be able to hear the voice of the ancestors. It's like this lesson in listening.
Yeah.
Right? I think you could probably speak more to this, but I think what I find, if I'm doing yoga right, what I notice is that my focus goes in a particular direction and trajectory. And it's like my body's not hostage to its limitations anymore because the mind has freed it.
Yoga does that. And I think when you can get to that place, that's what yoga does. Just as these other ceremonies do. It's not just what I visualized was, some people out there are just kind of grasping for the answers and, that tonic or whatever, that spokesperson that's just going to give them all the answers, right? And then they're highly disappointed when they take that concoction and it doesn't work or doesn't last long or whatever the case may be. But you're speaking to, the showing up, the participating, and being revealed, or that something is revealed to themselves, just as has been in ourselves, and it's a continual journey with us as well. That we have the power to do that work. We have that power within us. And again, I hope that's what people get out of these retreats, and that we get to speak to on the podcast, that show up and give it a shot.
Mm.
And try out these different things. And I think that's why we do different things. Try this ancestor burning, try this lodge, try this yoga.
Yeah.
Something might speak to you as that accessibility to, oh, that's how I access my own power. That's how I access knowledge and information. I don't have to go out there all the time. It's right here. And I think what I do in yoga per se, and I think this is happening in the other experiences too, but what I'm encouraging in yoga is realize that there's veils, walls, obstacles, whatever you want to call it, that get in the way of our vision, get in the way of our path. And the work is to start tearing down some of those obstacles, peel away, those curtains and the veils and everything, so you can see clearly. That's what meditation is helping us to do, just to see things more clearly. And if you can get, just a little crack of light and a clear pathway, you have the invitation then to step forward, step into that, and see what shows up.
Yeah.
See what shows up.
Yeah. I feel I want to talk about, I don't want to talk about anyone in particular, but I think what was interesting this morning, we were listening to the exit interviews that you had recorded. And you had also recorded people coming to the retreat.
Right.
And it was really interesting to me, the word anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And even before the retreat, like even with events and stuff like that, I've had people call me, text me, email me, and I don't get it, but it's interesting how many people have a narrative and a fear of congregating and actually engaging other gay men at this level of intimacy. Which is interesting because Grindr and Scruff is very popular. So I know we're around gay people.
Right.
Apparently there's not a lot of talking going on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But and what I was hearing in the interviews is people were afraid. They were scared. They weren't sure what they were going to meet up with. Part of it was they weren't sure about their experience they were going to have with the group. I think they all recognized that they were coming to do some particular interpersonal piece and maybe were afraid about how they were going to show up or be seen.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, what was your experience with that?
Well, it seems to be a common theme throughout, I mean, this whole year, basically, with our social events, the retreats. There's just this level of anxiety, and you nailed it. Just, you know, people are afraid to show up, and I think we've speculated in trying to kind of dig deep into what is that? What is that anxiety? You know, like you said, there's all these apps out there for a certain type of hookup. And when you compare that, I think, to something like a social event or even our retreats, they really sit on different sides of the spectrum, I think, in regards to what the expectation is, I think. I think with in some capacity, like the apps, there's a certain expectation. You kind of know what you're going to get as far as what you're signing up for. But for something like this, there just seems to be this fear of and shame around maybe being gay, around expressing themselves in a true fashion, that they're going to be, what's that? Oh, that term, imposter syndrome, where like I'm not going to be liked or misrepresented or just not going to fit in. I mean, the list kind of goes on, I think, in regards to what those anxieties and fears, are for some folks. And some of these guys, they talked about it in these, enter and exit interviews, but it's still very curious to me.
Well, I wonder, I hear what you're saying. I wonder if what I'm hearing is this question of, am I acceptable?
Yeah.
Am I going to show up and be the right kind of gay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Which is interesting. It seems like once they get through the front door and we get through the introductions, it's almost like that whole shroud of fear disintegrates.
Right. And that's what some of these guys said.
Yeah.
Like there was some anxiety, but once they got there, they were kind of calm and just kind of relieved that I'm here now. I still don't know what's going to happen, but
Yeah.
I'm here now. I'm starting to, meet the other people that are here, but I feel good. And I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah. Like, what are we doing to each other in between retreats? I mean, I think about that. I have this peculiar situation where I get to sit in sessions with a lot of gay men.
Yeah.
I have a pretty active social life around the things that I enjoy. So outside of Mindfully Gay, there's a community that supports the Sweat Lodge, that supports the pipe ceremony, and the other things that we do.
Right.
And I would say a good 25% of those people are gay men. A lot of the gay or trans people. I mean, we have men, women, cisgendered, transgendered, gay, lesbian, bi, Like the whole
Yeah, the
spectrum
whole
is there.
spectrum.
And so there is this broader context of community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I intersect with a lot of gay people who are hungry and desirous of learning and growing around these things.
Yeah.
But I also intersect a lot with the population. And it's interesting. I often feel like I'm put in that place of being extraordinary, even though that is not my narrative for myself. And I think I want to say to a 30-year-old, dude, I'm 60. And I didn't just like end up here. And guess what? I'm still unpacking my stories.
Exactly.
I'm still unpacking the question of being good enough. I'm unpacking what's my relevance at this point in my life versus what it was in my 30s, 40s, and 50s, right? What I enjoy about something like Mindfully Gay, I think I even said my intention was to kind of find some space energetically around redefining who I am, which isn't like this event. It's kind of an ongoing process.
Ongoing.
But I have to wonder, and I've lately been intersecting with folks who are not so a part of my normal community, and it's interesting, this place of appearance, this place of the bodies that get privileged, the colors that get privileged, the layers of masculinity and femininity that get, it's interesting how those things kind of play out. I would say there's an interest, my observation is that I see a particular group of people who push those kind of agendas because of their immaturity. But what's interesting is how many people play into it. I want your acceptance. I want you to see me because I think you have something that I don't have. Is that just crazy me or what?
No, I think you're hitting something that people are experiencing, that they have, like what I said earlier, people are looking outside of themselves for that answer and that acceptance and that relevance, where we're just, I don't know how to say it, but we're just guides in a way, and we're certainly on the journey too, just to show them here's an opportunity for you to not always look on the outside, but look on the inside, and that you are relevant, you are important, you are accepted, and to live authentically and tap into what that is for you. Because if we're just, and like you said, we are, buying into all of that stuff out there, and we clearly see it. We just buy into it because I think that's just normal. I think that's just become the norm for a lot of folks, living in our own traumas and just kind of living it out, right? and not really taking the time and the resources to let me sit and do this work. Let me sit and figure out what this is.
Yeah.
It's just more comfortable and it's easier just to kind of ride that trauma. That's what they know. They know the anxiety, they know the fear. I'm just going to do it that way, and just continue to complain about it. That's just the cycle. And unfortunately, some people just get trapped in that cycle and can't get out.
Yeah.
Until maybe they've stumbled across a podcast like this, or a person that, hey, how'd you like to go to this retreat with me or this event with me? I'm going to this heart circle. I haven't been, but it'd be interesting to check this out and see what's involved. I think we're providing, those little nuggets, hopefully, that people can, oh, what's that? That's shiny and attractive, and try this out. But you're right, people are just stuck in this loop.
Yeah, we can lay out the bait, but people still have to take it.
You got to take the bait.
And you just did this roller skating event, and I know a young man who showed up at that event who agonized about showing up.
Really?
Terrified at the whole idea, because I don't even know that he could pinpoint the fear. So I shamed him into going. But in spending some time processing, he found the courage to sign up and to go. And I got to talk to him a few days afterwards.
Uh-huh.
And he was so energized by the experience. And then the little bitch said, "How come there aren't more activities on the schedule?" I'm like, "Well, I'm working on it."
Hang on. Doing our best.
This is a free thing we're doing, right? But it was interesting,
Mhm.
right? It was kind of like this infectious thing. And
Yeah.
one thing I heard in the interviews with the retreat folks is a couple of guys had been to some heart circles and they
Yeah.
had been to some other events. And that's where the theme of communities showed up,
Mhm.
is whether they understood what was happening at the retreat or not, what they did get was a sense of connectedness, community. I think one of the participants said, I feel like I can pick up a phone and talk to someone.
Mhm.
And I would say that's the other thing I hear is how many gay men have lots of women friends,
Mhm. Right.
but they're very insulated from any gay camaraderie
Yeah.
and connectedness.
Mhm.
And that was the one comment I liked in the interview is I feel like I can pick up the phone. And I thought, well, good.
Yeah.
Pick it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anything, if it wasn't profound, enlightenment after this retreat, it was, you know, at least these guys took the bait. They showed up. They participated, from day one to the very end, and they got something out of it. And and I think that's a big piece too. We talked about anxiety a little bit and feeling like, oh, I'm okay. I can be here, and I'm starting to connect with people. And yeah, building community.
I don't know about you, but every time we do an event, every time we do a retreat, even though we're the master of ceremonies, I have anxiety.
I do too.
I think, I gotta vacuum the floor. I gotta clean. Right? Is the house clean enough? Do I have enough refreshments? Oh my gosh! When they walk through the door, what are we going to talk about?
Mhm.
I mean, guess what? I have that anxiety too.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I'm a little bit more practiced at challenging myself through it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, because I think we're used to this. I think we know what to do with that anxiety.
yeah,
We can it can show up. We can even honor it and just acknowledge it, and know that we're gonna, we'll get past that. It's not going to hinder us in the work that we do. And I'll be honest too, because I think we had the conversation before the retreat. Just cosmically, some odd things were going on. Just eclipses and things like that. And I know we were just
vaccines.
vaccines and just stuff was happening, and my energy was just so low and just was sliding.
Yeah,
And I was like, Jerry, honestly, I don't want to show up. I am, but I don't want to,
yeah.
and so I was sitting with that.
I was like, girl, get your ass over here now.
I know. I mean, I wasn't going to bail because I knew that once I'm there, it's going to be fine. But I was concerned about, showing up, being able to hold space and be authentic with this kind of cloudiness that was just kind of hovering over me. But I have to say, at the end of the retreat, I felt so much better. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I got to participate in this, because it's always good medicine for me when we do this. So it was quite remarkable. So I'm hoping that the folks that did participate got something out of it. Again, it may not have been this revelation of things, but if it was just, hey, I feel like I can pick up the phone and call one of these guys.
Yeah.
Box checked. We did our work, we did our job, and they did too.
Well, if you remember the guy from Montana,
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons he came out, he said, I just have a hard time finding other men who are willing to practice mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy from Idaho, right? his issue was, I'm having a hard time connecting with my community in Idaho because it doesn't feel like anyone's there to have these conversations.
Yeah. I think someone else said, I'm in this climate where everything is kind of homogenous. I'm with the same people all the time.
Yeah.
And needed to step out of that and just kind of get something that felt fresh and new.
Yeah.
After the retreat, we asked some of the participants what resonated with them. Here's Taylor and Rolly.
The ancestral burning, especially in that it was focused on honoring and connecting to ancestors, which has been a practice that has not been, in large part, in my life, not even in a small way, actually. It's never really been something discussed in my family unit or something that we have ever focused on much beyond Memorial Day for an hour, laying some flowers. So that ceremony in particular, and then the focus on ancestral connections throughout this weekend has been very new but exciting and exciting to explore and to further those connections that I rarely think about, but has spawned interest in furthering those relationships further.
Probably the thing that resonated the most, and while I still don't have it fully defined in my mind because I have to define things, is what I'm afraid of. I was asked at Lodge what I'm afraid of, and I wasn't readily able to identify that, and I don't know that I fully know. Someone shared with me after that my countenance and voice, and we're in the dark, and we're sharing that experience, and they said, but you sounded different from the first time I shared to the second time, and I did feel safer. And what I initially thought was the closeness and the difficulty to breathe, and it wasn't really related to that. And so I'm most looking forward to finding out what I'm categorizing as fear, and then ripping that apart and shedding that, if you will.
I think maybe I've talked to you about this privately, but I think it's an interest. I'm having this interesting dialogue with Charles, my mentor, who we interviewed on the show a while ago, which was a very popular show, actually. And we've been working around this concept of what is transformation. And I've been really struggling or trying to conceptualize. And I think my own aging process has kind of put me in that space where, next month I'm 60, and I'm not sure. I've never been 60 before, right. So I'm not sure how I'm supposed to show up or what I'm supposed to be. And my 30s and my 40s and even my 50s, I've been this very active mental health gay activist, educator. Here in Salt Lake City, I was the first openly out LGBTQ clinic for a long time. Now everyone thinks they're a pioneer. I'm like, no offense, but fuck you. Where were you in the 90s? Right? And so I've been able to kind of build this identity around that history and around that level of advocacy. And what I'm recognizing is at this particular stage of my life, the relevance of that part of my identity is not as strong. And that it's time to revision and start thinking about my eldership. And what does that look like? And how does that show up? And the tension that I'm feeling between wanting to hold on to what was, right? And being hungry for something that's delicious on the other end, right? It's like, I don't want to let go of this. And I think I posted something on Facebook and on the Instagram page where this woman talked about allowing the identity of what was to die, to literally let go, to move into what is. And the conversation I've been having with Charles has been, what is that process? what is that metamorphosis? How does one let it go and die to it and step into this like place of the unknown?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in discussing it, it's a very easy discussion to have. The practicalities are immense.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't think psychotherapy, ironically enough, and is the mechanism. I think it's part of the tool.
It's part of the, yeah.
But I do believe that these rites of initiations, these ceremonies, these processes of catalyst often put us in a place outside of the history and the ordinary into the extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the dilemma I see in the gay community that I'm interacting with, is we've become really complacent in the place of victim, and we feel as if our circumstances are defined by those around us. And there is a hesitation and an anxiety about letting go of the past, letting go of the identity of victim, and to step into this newer place of self-engineering my outcome, being in charge, deliberately stepping out of the norms. It's interesting, we complain about the norms that heterosexuality has put on us, but we fucking do it to ourselves.
We're doing it to ourselves.
We create this norm
Yeah.
about, well, gay is a six-pack, and gay is this, and gay is that.
Mhm.
And it's like,
Mhm.
it's no.
Right. Right.
It can be that for you. It can be, right? But what if I want to see it as a magical place?
Mm-hmm.
What if I want to see it as a, queer folks have showed up as kind of like midwives to processes and all these other cultures. They've channeled the medicines for the people. How's that different in Utah?
Yeah. What's fascinating, I'm just thinking about, your transformation and continual transformation and the realization that that's happening, especially as you're kind of stepping into a new era for yourself. I'm just trying to think, what if you, Jerry, were coming to this retreat, and hoping for some kind of shift and change. But I'm thinking about Jerry a year ago, because you were in a very different place a year ago. I think you talked about just, this is before, well, maybe more, almost like 2 years probably, have kind of settled into, well, this is what I do as a therapist. I do this community work, this ritual work, and just kind of got complacent maybe with, that's what I am, that's what I do.
And I'm old and fat.
And that became, and
Yeah.
maybe that was part of your narrative for that time, but then something shifted, something changed. You got into this fitness routine, changed your diet. And as that was slowly kind of changing your insides, something was also changing here in the head and also in the heart, and starting to see your own pathway shift and change. Like in the yoga, the veil was being lifted.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know, I'm being facetious, but as I lost all that weight, it's almost like the weight was trapping the stories of body image.
Absolutely.
Because I went through this interesting process where just I never even knew I had like shame about my body. And as it started to change, I was like those fat cells were holding on to something.
Mm-hmm.
And as I started to kind of just like acknowledge the changes, then it opened up this place of, well, if I can do it with my body,
right,
how can I do that with my identity?
Exactly.
How can I do that with how I show up in the world? How can I step out of the box and be extraordinary?
Yes.
I often tell people success breeds success. And one thing I will ask a client is, when you've done it right, what were you doing? So that I can get them to do more of it.
Yeah, do it again.
Yeah.
And do more of it. Exactly.
And that was definitely my experience. And I think I think the questions I'm asking today might be part of the initiation of age, but I think it is also a layer of this interpersonal acknowledgement. Like I've always endorsed transformation. I've always endorsed the idea of changing, but I don't think I've realized it as real for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to facilitate it for others.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I had my own experience
Yeah.
with it that it's like suddenly it opened up Pandora's box and it's like, oh, there is magic in
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Not just talking about it and teaching it and offering it, but actually having the personal experience of it. And so I'm now again thinking about that newbie, that's showing up to a retreat or a social gathering like roller skating or whatever.
It's their initiation.
That's their initiation. They're getting a little taste and of something that's just a little different. And then they become hungry
Yeah.
for, ooh.
Well, and I've seen this. We've seen it recently. When somebody starts going into that place of consciousness, you've got two directions. You can lean into it and step forward and allow it to continue to transform you,
Mm-hmm.
or you can retreat back to what's familiar.
Yep, shut the door and just go back to whatever you were doing, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to Walmart.
Yeah. So maybe is what's happening, with like the retreat and some of the guys, we're hoping that they're going to have this, they're going to get it, right? And maybe they are in their own way. That they're getting that taste. They took the bait, they showed up. Congratulations, really. Success. Let's build on the success.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when's the next offering? When's the next event?
It's interesting. It's so hard to get people to the retreat. And then they're like, oh, you need to do a series and you need to do a step program. And I'm like, do you know how hard it was to get you here?
Right.
That now you want me to have like this graduated process? And I appreciate, right, the hunger. And
yes,
I think
yes.
I think it gives us a trajectory of where this could go.
Exactly.
But
it is funny.
I'm like, really?
Really? Yeah. Oh, man.
So, yeah, I think that's our retreat. It might even be worth it to replay this episode as we build for the April retreat.
Yeah.
Which, have you looked at the calendar?
Yeah. So we have a retreat middle of April 2025 that's scheduled. It's on the calendar,
Right.
yeah. And one in September of 2025.
Right.
And so those are solid. We might do more. We don't know, but those are certainly solid and are on the calendar. So, and there will certainly be, some more social events and gatherings, social, talking circles, lodge, and just other activities, sprinkled in there.
Well, one thing I was thinking, but we'll just brainstorm here with everyone listening.
Yeah.
Because I know the podcast is reaching a lot of people just outside of Utah. In fact, statistically, I think about half of our listeners are from the Utah area.
Sure, right.
The rest are in Indonesia. Love you, Indonesia. What I hear from people is like they're paying attention to the events. They're paying attention to the opportunities. I'm actually surprised, like our national, this will be over with, but on October 12th, we're having a national coming out, kind of a day retreat.
Mm-hmm.
People will get at the house about 3:00 in the afternoon. We'll have a heart circle, and then we'll go finish the day up in lodge, and we will be celebrating our coming out stories.
Yeah.
That's filling up.
Oh, yay.
The heart circles.
Yes.
Are very popular.
Mm-hmm.
And they are heart circles. Like,
because think about what they are. Because I think it's exactly what gay men, queer men, people in general deeply need, but aren't able to articulate that they need this.
Yeah.
And so when they show up and see what this is, and they're like, oh yes, it's an opportunity to speak, to have a voice, and be heard. Because that's what's beautiful about this, is that when you get that talking stick, it's your turn. You get to talk and say what's on your mind without being judged. You're being heard. You're being seen, and I think that speaks to a lot of what people in general just want
Yeah.
and need. And when you kind of get that warm fuzzy, that's certainly another kind of nugget of deliciousness of, wow, I really needed that. Um, and so when that kind of gets out, the word gets out that, oh, this talking circle, you got to go, or I'm definitely going to that. I think that's one of the reasons why it is growing
Mm,
in numbers and people are showing up, because it is what people need.
yeah.
Because I think because it's part of that process of breaking down the walls and not only listening to themselves speak and maybe talk through their anxiety and traumas and etc., um, to start, breaking through, getting that weight lifted off their shoulders and out of their guts so that they can take that next step forward. And then other people are hearing it and witnessing it and doing it, um, and giving them the courage to do the same thing. So, the talking circles.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I mean, I'm just, I think in reflection of that, I'm just recognizing, um, I guess my narrative is, oh, who's going to be interested in this?
mm.
And I'm surprised at how many people are signing up for it, right? I know how it feeds me.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was one thing we had discussed, right? The three of us is just the things that we're naturally inclined to do are the things that we should work
Just
at
do.
trying to invite
Yeah.
people
Mm-hmm.
to.
Yeah.
And I think that's a formula that's working,
Yeah.
speaking to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, what I would love to see happen is for us to be able to do more retreats and maybe doing day retreats,
Mm-hmm.
immersives. I know a topic that comes up quite a bit is around faith transition, especially here in Utah, where
Especially
people are
here.
leaving Mormonism
Mm-hmm.
and struggling to find something. So I think there's lots of opportunities that can be created. I think the roller skating thing was a brilliant idea. Um, I think we've talked about game nights,
Mm-hmm.
movie nights.
Yeah.
I personally hate board games, so you're taking that one over, but I'll do a movie.
Yeah.
So again, just creating that space for us to come together and build friendship. And we actually did a ceremony the following week after the retreat.
Yeah.
And we had a group of like 6 gay guys. And it wasn't even orchestrated that way.
Mm-mm.
We had a couple guys. One guy was from Canada. One guy was from California. They were from all over the place. But somebody made the observation, and this was not mindfully gay related, but as we were in our little talking circle, they said how nurturing it was to be sitting with other gay men having these intimate, vulnerable conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, can I record that? No.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt I got to participate. I'm so glad I did, because it was refreshing.
Yeah.
It was so refreshing.
Yeah.
To have that experience, and to be in circle with those folks. And that's what we're doing with Mindfully Gay as well, that we're just providing the space, show up, and hopefully it is something that's refreshing to them,
Yeah.
and we'll encourage them to keep the door open and they're walking down that path rather than shutting the door behind them and
Yeah.
not stepping forward.
Yeah. I think we've done a pretty good job of talking about this. I think I'm really interested about what our next podcast is going to be, because we're going to be interviewing someone who has a history of having facilitated conversion therapy, who is now an openly gay man,
Yeah.
so self-accepting, and he's agreed to come and sit with us and to kind of have a process,
Mm-hmm.
partly an accounting for what he did, but to also talk about his journey of coming into who he is, and very much raw in his process. And as I think about this, I think how powerful it's going to be for the listeners who may be triggered by some of the things that he talks about, but can also kind of actively witness the power of mindfully coming to terms with who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. So I think that's it. Thank you so much for listening. We've got more events on the calendar and more will be showing up. Um, check your calendars for even April of 2025, September of 2025. If the retreat has been something that you've been thinking about and it's just been just nagging at you and you want to participate, just get it into your calendar, register, come join us. But to practice a little bit of that, come up to one of our, to one of our day, social events or a talking circle, a sweat lodge. We'd love to have you. And I think like we've been saying, it's, keep building on your own successes. The success may feel small, but it can be quite profound. And we can celebrate that. We want to celebrate that with you. And so you can continue your journey forward to become who you really want to be fully yourself, authentic, free, open, so you can step into your next era, as Mr. Jerry Bowie is going to be doing very soon.
Yay!
A new era in his prime time in life. So again, thank you so much, and we will see you next time on the Mindfully Gay podcast.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This way you won't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes where we continue to explore fascinating topics and share meaningful stories. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next episode.